Now, as the standoff between Iran and the United States shows no signs of easing, all eyes on Iraq, caught between Washington's pressure campaign and Tehran's network of allied militias on Iraqi soil. The question now is whether Baghdad can hold its ground and what a wider escalation could mean for Kurdistan and the broader Gulf. Well, to break this down, we're joined by the Ambassador Peter Galbraith, the first US Ambassador to Croatia, ex-Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations and long-term advisor to the Kurdistan regional government, who helped shape Iraq's 2005 constitution. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us today. Given your work advising the Kurdistan regional government, how exposed is Iraq, especially Kurdistan, to becoming a battleground if the Iran-US tensions over Hormuz continue to escalate?
Iraq is very exposed, and Kurdistan is probably the most exposed part of Iraq. There is in Erbil, the Americans have an air base attached to or near the airport, so that has become a target for Iranian drones. There's a lot of pressure on the Kurds to support the U.S. militarily. Wisely, they are not doing that. And the Iraqi government is torn between the support it receives from the United States, the fact that Iran is a neighbor, and the fact that the dominant Shia religious parties in Iraq, who are the largest political parties, were parties that were sponsored by Iran, or in one case actually founded in Tehran in 1982. Iraq is Iran's closest ally in the world.
And so Iran has long used Iraqi militia networks as leveraged against the US interests. Is Baghdad's central government strong enough to stay neutral this time, or is it structurally too weak to resist being pulled in?
I think the Iraqi government can stay neutral. It can't control all the Shia militias, which are aligned with important political parliaments in political parties in the Iraqi Council of Representatives, the Iraqi parliament. But the Iraqi government, I think, knows the folly of getting involved with the United States in this. And incidentally, so do the Kurds. Early in this war, there was an effort on the part of people in the Bush administration and the Israelis to encourage the Kurds to participate, both for the Iranian Kurds to go in and start some kind of uprising in northwest Iran, and for the Iraqi Kurds to support them. And wisely, the Iraqi Kurds shut that down, said it isn't going to happen, and the Iranian Kurds didn't do anything. Why? Because the Kurds know that there's a 51-year history of the United States trying to use them for military purposes, going back to Henry Kissinger accommodating the Shah, who wanted to use the Kurds as a leverage in the 1970s, and then betraying them when he made a deal with Saddam Hussein in 1975, to George Bush Sr. calling for an uprising in Iraq and then allowing Saddam to crush it just after the first Gulf War. And Donald Trump's been a three-time betrayer of the Kurds. First in September of 2017, when he allowed Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian commander, and Abu Mahdi Muhandis, an Iraqi Shia leader who had actually been convicted of terrorism, of blowing up the U.S. embassy in Kuwait in 1983, he allowed them to use their Abrams tanks to attack the Kurds, America's closest ally. And then in November of 2019, he gave President Erdogan of Turkey a green light to attack the Kurds in Syria, just after they'd been the boots on the ground for the Americans in the successful campaign against ISIS. And finally, again in Syria in January of this year, Trump cooperated with the new Syrian regime, one that is headed by a guy who was a leader of Al-Qaeda, to attack the Kurds, who again had been America's allies. So I think the Kurds understand better than any of the Iraqis the folly of being aligned with the United States, and particularly being aligned with Donald Trump. So I think the policy of both the Kurds and the Iranians and the Iraqis is to stay out, to try to maintain good relations with both sides. And for the sake of greater peace in the Near East and certainly in Iraq, I hope they succeed.
And Ambassador, you have long argued Iraq is functionally already broken into three parts. Does this crisis strengthen the case for Kurdish autonomy?
Well, Kurdistan already very substantial autonomy, in many ways de facto independence under the 2005 Constitution. It has its own president, its own parliament. It has the right to maintain its own military. It can keep the Iraqi army out of Kurdistan. And it has the power to cancel or amend the application of Iraqi laws within Kurdistan. Those are most of the features of an independent state. But the reality in this world is very simple. Where you have people in a geographically defined area who overwhelmingly do not want to be part of the country that they are in, who overwhelmingly want independence, sooner or later they're going to get it. And the people of Iraqi Kurdistan overwhelmingly do not want to be part of Iraq. They voted in September of 2017, 93% for independence in a referendum. I observed it. Huge turnout. No doubt that it was completely fair. There have now been 5 Kurds who have been presidents of Iraq since Saddam was overthrown, and every single one of them would prefer to have had an independent Kurdistan. So this is an untenable situation. It isn't just autonomy. They want independence. Now, with regard to Arab Iraq, that's a separate issue. Nobody's talking about breaking that up into separate states. The problem is that while both Sunnis and Shia describe themselves as Iraqi, and Kurds would never describe themselves as Iraqi, they have had very different views of what that means. And that has led to the civil war in 2005 and 6 and 7, which incidentally was a civil war that didn't involve the Kurds, but between Sunnis and Shias, and that tension very much remains.
And so, drawing on your experience mediating the Erdut agreement in the Balkans, what does effective third-party mediation actually require? And is any current player, say Pakistan, Qatar or Oman, positioned to do that between Iran and the United States?
Well, first, I want to commend Pakistan and Oman and Qatar for their mediation efforts. But there's really no comparison between what the United States did and what I personally did in the Balkans in the 90s to the situation today. First, the United States, we were the mediator. At that time, we were the undisputed superpower, the king of the world, and this was Europe. And these were small places. Both the Croatians and the Serbs had to listen to us. So we were not just some third party between the two sides. We had a lot of power both there and in the negotiations that led to the Dayton Peace Treaty. The role, Pakistan, Oman, and Qatar don't have that kind of power. Their role is important because the Iranians won't talk directly to the United States, so that there's the helpful, it's necessary to have a third party intervention. But they're also undercut, frankly, by the behavior of Donald Trump and the Americans. The Omanis were sponsoring talks in which the Iranians had made very substantial concessions. I think it was on the 26th of February, 2 days before the Israeli and American attack. Well, that completely undercut Oman's position as a mediator. It's disgraceful. Pakistan has a lot of the similar problems. The Iranians say that Donald Trump's word is worthless, and they're probably right. That is a big problem in a negotiation when one of the partners, gives his word and then doesn't stick by it.
And so you were dismissed from your UN role in Afghanistan after challenging the official handling election fraud. Does this experience make you more skeptical of the narratives now coming out of Washington or Tehran?
No, I wouldn't say that experience makes me more skeptical. It really was an issue related to the United Nations role in Afghanistan, which was to support the conduct of free, fair, inclusive, and transparent elections. And the head of the UN mission sought to cover up the fraud in the elections, and ultimately we could see that action, the false elections, had disastrous consequences for Afghanistan, and I would argue led directly to the what happened 12 years later with the Taliban victory. But I am skeptical of the narratives coming out of both Washington and Tehran, talking particularly about from the American side. This war is based on a lot of lies. It is what were the objectives? I mean, you want to talk about whether a war is going to be successful or not, you have to measure it against the objectives and the cost. One of the objectives was to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon. Well, Donald Trump said that in June of 2025, we had totally obliterated Iran's nuclear program. And incidentally, Iran had already given it up with the Iran nuclear deal, which Trump broke in his first term, but everybody agrees they were honoring it. Now the objective is to open the Strait of Hormuz, which was open the day before the war began. And of course, the war has had some other consequences in terms of military technology. The announced goal was to eliminate Iran's missiles. But the real problem is Iranian drones, which drones turn out, and if the U.S. had been paying attention, they would have understood this from what was going on in Ukraine. Drones turn out to be an incredibly effective weapon. And there really isn't, the U.S. does not have an effective way to counter them. So, and you see also the statements that Trump has made in the narrative. He said his objective was unconditional surrender. And then the first agreement involved basically accepting almost all of Iran's terms. Incidentally, Iran, yes, he claimed it was a great success that Iran said it wouldn't develop nuclear weapons. Well, there have been consistently the Iranian statement. So there was just nothing new about that. He's talked about obliterating an entire civilization. Well, that would be a war crime of the highest magnitude. Of course, he didn't do it, and I don't suppose he was ever intending to. But it's really hard when you have a president. Well, frankly, let's see what Donald Trump is. I mean, this is an 80-year-old man who shows all sorts of signs of cognitive. And unfortunately, the people in the highest levels of the U.S. government, the Republican Party, keep pretending that they know as well as anybody else who looks at him that there's something wrong with him. They know it, but they aren't prepared to stand up to him. And that's what makes this war so difficult. I will say that the American people understand that, which is why this war is so unpopular. Traditionally, when America goes to war, when any country goes to war, but it's always been an American tradition, the war is popular at the beginning, and then the support for it declines. But in this case, this war has been unpopular from day one. It's cost $150 billion directly. But for every American family, a household, it's already cost them at least $600 or $700 in extra gas prices, and that's just a few months. It will cost every American thousands of dollars in inflation and extra gas costs, and all based on lies.
Ambassador Galbraith, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it lots.